Welcome to the CRM MVP podcast, episode number 41. This episode is pretty special because, when I was like 10 years old, I was, in elementary school or whatever. And I remember we had this scientist come to our school. His name is Humberto Fernandez Moran. That's his name. And it was back then when I was 10, we used to sort of look up to scientists rather than like the Kardashians, which is what seems to happen these days. So this guy is like a super, super smart scientist who was born in the city I was born in Venezuela, and Maracay was the name of the city. And he came to our school and he gave this speech and he talked about, essentially all the work that he had done. So he worked for a long time on the Apollo program at NASA. He lived in Houston and worked at NASA. Then he moved to Stockholm and invented the diamond scalpel, and he worked on, I think it was the electronic microscope, and he just created these amazing inventions. And he always talked about that all of the cities that he lived on, Stockholm was his favorite. He always mentioned that, Stockholm was his favorite. And I remember that after that whole conversation or speech that he gave us at school, I knew two things, and I was 10. One thing is I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to work on systems of some kind or whatever. I was, attracted to that. And the other thing is I wanted to go to Stockholm. So 15 years later 10 years later after that whole conversation, I became an engineer. I graduated as an engineer 10 years later when I was 20. And today I'm in Stockholm. So it's awesome. That's where we're recording the episode here live. So in a way, you guys made my dream come true, which is awesome. But again, thinking about him and thinking about the fact that he just went back and forward into Houston and Stockholm. Funny enough, he never spoke about the city where I was born and he was born being on the top 3 even of cities. So that was interesting, but I don't blame him because I've been to Houston and now I've been to Stockholm, and yeah, he was right. It's beautiful here. But it made me think about, what else when it comes to dynamics, and I know this is a kind of a weird segue, but what else when it comes to dynamics? We have like this battle between two or more ways of doing something. And, why do we sometimes have these like best practices, this sort of ingrained way of doing something? And the conversation came because I was at the CRMG's meeting in Atlanta, and Steven Smith from Microsoft did this presentation about performance. And one of the things that he talked about is that his best practice was that when it comes to workflows, he always wants to make the workflows in real time because they perform better. And then I was sitting and I'm like, obviously he knows what he's doing. He's an expert on it. But for me, I see it the opposite. I think that every workflow should be background unless I need it to be real time, because real time workflows sort of put the system on pause. And I hate that. I want them to execute behind the scenes when the users are not even looking at it or thinking about it. So there's pros and cons on both sides. So I wanted to write a list of 10 things that are situations like that, where there's 2 or more ways to do it. And I wanted to invite a few people to talk about those to see how they sort of match my own best practices and how you guys approach it. Now, here in the room, we have 5 people. So with counting myself, we have Jonas. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gus.
Absolutely. Auntie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gus.
New MVP, I guess, or fairly new?
Yes, I am. A couple of months in.
That's right. Chris, you're the newest MVP, I guess.
Indeed. What's up? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Gustav, you've been on the show a few times.
I have. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, welcome back. So this is, with the exception of me and Chris, this is sort of like a Nordic Viking kind of episode. Although South Africans are sort of like the Vikings of the South.
We're pretty close.
Yeah.
Vikings of Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's true. So to all my fellow South Africans out there, what's up? We're Vikings now.
Exactly. Definitely. So welcome, everybody. So again, like I mentioned, the idea for this episode is let's talk about these situations where, one versus the other. And I think we should start with the one I just mentioned, which is real-time workflows versus background workflows. And as I mentioned, my best practice is I'm going to use background workflows for everything unless I need to use a real-time workflow, unless I have to, make something happen before I commit a change, before I change the status, before I do something. And I guess if I see it from Steven's side, he's going to use real-time unless he needs a background. Like if you have a wait condition, then you need to use a background workflow because you cannot wait on that would be really bad if you waited for 9 months on a real-time workflow. So how do you guys feel about it? Jonas, what do you think?
Well, I actually agree completely with you there. If there's a problem, according to his argumentation, that the async engine creates so much overhead, it takes so much resources, well, that's not our problem, to make it easy for myself. That's part of the platform. They should handle that. And I think it makes total sense that make it real time if you need immediate feedback. Otherwise, make it happen sometime when the server has time.
But what would you say to, for example, and just to play devil's advocate, like people like Joel, for example, brought up a good point, which is if you're executing thousands and thousands of workflows, async just cannot keep up. So you can just not do everything behind the scenes. But is that a good enough reason to execute everything in real time?
No, I think, the server cannot catch up and have time with this. But the reason for having our systems is for our users to have a good user experience. They want to be able to see their records come back. They don't want to wait for things when they really don't have to, just because there would otherwise be a queue on the server.
Absolutely. What do you guys think? Like, anyone wants to chime in?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with what you're saying. I think that there might be systems, especially large systems, which I think that Steven is typically working with.
He mentioned that he typically works in super large implementations. So maybe in those cases it makes more sense.
I think they might actually be like the exception here, because I think typically when you're working with really, really large systems, I don't actually do that myself.
Right.
But I think that if you do that and you like trigger like really large amounts of asynchronous workflows, you might get into that case where, well, the online platform doesn't actually keep up. And then so you might argue what like Jonas is saying that, well, it should do that, but it doesn't.
It's not my problem that it's not keeping up.
It's not. We can always say that it should, but it doesn't. So what should we do? Should we like?
It's not your problem, but it's your problem.
It is your problem because it's not keeping up, right? So we have to face reality, and we have to do something about reality. We can't like live in the dream world. So so I think from that perspective, then he might have faced reality about that, saying that, well, we get to a certain point in large systems where we can't actually work with asynchronous workflows anymore if we're triggering too much. It's just going to like overflow the system, and it's not going to keep up, and we're going to create more workflows, asynchronous workflows in the jobs queue than the workflow engine is going to be able to execute. So it's going to create more, and the pile is going to just keep piling up.
So scale up the server.
Yeah,
I agree.
We're on Azure.
If you're online, how are you going to do that?
But how that would be great if you could, and if you could ask Microsoft, please scale up our server.
And they can. If you have these huge implementations, they will listen.
Oh, they do. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. So why doesn't it do that then?
Okay, so assuming that the scaling is not the reason here, let's assume that async can keep up.
Yeah.
What would your best practice be then? So again, real time versus background.
Well, if it can keep up, I would generally agree with you. I'm pragmatic. I would say that it's. I think it's. You don't want to hurt the user experience.
Right.
Yeah. So I agree with Jonas. Then why would you hurt the user experience by slowing it down?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe it comes down to individual user experience versus overall system experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, generally, I think you want to err out on the side of user experience. You want the system to perform as good as possible for the users.
Yeah, but if the total system system performance just degrades, then nothing is going to happen. So I mean, you're not going to gain anything from that. So
that's true.
Well, degraded system equals degraded user experience, which is ultimately the worst possible thing in a Dynamics implementation. Right. That's the worst thing you can do, is ruin the user experience. Like, in my opinion, most of the time I've used background workflows, I've only ever used real time a few times, and that's mostly out of absolute necessity. But purely just my opinion, right? Like, you have to look at the scenario of when you would use a real-time workflow, right? For me, the background workflows do everything I need. I don't need to use them, so the real-time ones, so I don't.
Good. Antti, what do you think?
I think that I would use background workflows for the majority of cases. Probably some of the different situations that I do real time would be to prevent a user from perhaps submitting a record, for example, like time entry using TSA, for example, prevent them from submitting those and just do that as a real time workflow.
But is that not a business rule? So this is where I get confused, and maybe this is just me, but I always think, can I do it with a business rule? If I can, absolutely. If absolutely not, will the background workflow cover it? No, then I've got to use a real-time workflow.
Yeah, no, and I mean, there are some limitations where you're forced to do it. Like, for example, on a background workflow, you cannot run it before an event takes place.
Yeah,
you have to use a real-time workflow for that. Just like if you need a wait condition, you have to use a background workflow for that. So sometimes you're forced to use one over the other. There's no choice for you. But, you know, again, and as we move forward with the list, I want to make sure that everybody understands that the 5 of us here in this episode are MVPs, and that as MVPs, we're independent thought leaders, essentially. We have our own opinion. We don't really need to conform to the best practice from the Microsoft side. And as we talk about this, obviously, I want you guys to take your hat off, because it's hard sometimes to go against, you know, the messaging that is out there. So here's the next one. The next one is a good example for it. And I want your honest opinion on this. If you're starting a project today for a customer, okay, and you identify some metrics that you want to measure, and you identify some charts and dashboard opportunities for business intelligence, okay, is your first sort of instinct to go with out-of-the-box dashboards and charts or Power BI? Now, again, assuming that the customer has gathered the necessary licenses to use Power BI, maybe Power BI Pro, so they can share dashboards with each other and all of that. Let's just say the customer has no problem when it comes to licensing and getting this functionality. What is your first sort of instinct to go with?
Can I take this one?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think they do 2 very different things. I've always framed a dashboard as a workspace. So I say, like, this is the place where I log in and check out all my stuff, and where I start to interact with all my stuff, right? So
we know that there are some things that Power BI can do that you cannot do with regular dashboards, right? We know that the out-of-the-box dashboards and charts will focus on mainly data that is within Dynamics, whereas in Power BI, we can pull data from all kinds of sources. And yes, we have virtual entities, but that's still not really in the picture yet.
Yep.
So my thought process is, if you have something that can be done with both, let's say you want to show a chart of a pipeline chart or something like that, which you can do in both, or you want to show chart about cases and case resolution by resource or whatever, something you can do on both. What's your approach? Is your approach to go Power BI straight up, or do you still lean towards the out-of-the-box stuff?
I use as much as I can out of the box. Genuinely, I always see Power BI within Dynamics as something that fills the gaps from a dashboarding perspective. The other thing is that when you're looking at that data, what is your goal? Your goal is to get access to the information, right? I mean, yes, you do need to gain an understanding from a consolidated perspective, but when you're looking at that pipeline chart, your initial idea is to go, what have I got in stage 2? Click on stage 2, drill into the records, and then interact with them, right? Power BI, it's not quite there yet. Whereas in Dynamics, you've got direct access to that data. So in my opinion, that's the way I go. When I'm using Power BI, right, I use it, number one, as a mechanism to bring data together where I don't need to, so without integrating. So where customers spend tons and tons of cash and moving data into Dynamics, I'm like, well, you don't need to. Yes, we've got virtual entities, but Power BI is a really good way to bring that data together against Dynamics data. So I think they do 2 very different things. And like I said, if you're looking at the scenario where you're doing apples for apples, right?
Business intelligence, just straight up,
Then to me, obviously dashboarding first, then hitting Power BI, and I've had massive success with both.
Interesting, because I wonder if any of you sort of approach them differently, where you say, I think Power BI is going places. I think that who knows if dashboards and charts are going to be available in the future. Like Microsoft obviously hasn't announced anything. If they had, we couldn't talk about it under NDA, right? So the fact that they haven't announced anything makes us speculate that what if they get rid of it? Like, should I just stick with Power BI? Because we know that's going to stick around for a long time. How do you guys approach this?
Well, generally, if you start a project, you want to do the new cool stuff. So, from that perspective, I'd personally want to go with the Power BI because, that's where we're heading at some point. And I guess another aspect of it could be, would this dashboard or data need to be accessed from somewhere else? A Power BI report can be accessed in other ways than through the Dynamics platform.
We have Power BI mobile. We have, other ways to do it. We can even embed it, right, under the right circumstances and allow our customers to access the data if we want to, which is a big advantage, obviously. And obviously, we have situations where the stuff that Power BI can do, you just can't do it out of the box.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to report 500,000 records? You can, because aggregation limits you to 50,000, right? We talked about this on a previous episode. So there are some things that you need Power BI for. But what about those things that are either one? And I feel like I'm more aligned with you, Chris, in that I go always with what's in Dynamics first and then go to Power BI if I can do it with the out of the box.
Spot on.
But again, I'm open to another perspective.
And I agree with you, Gus. I this is always the way I start as well. But I'm quite quickly go to Power BI if I need to.
Right.
And also going the path of data export service and using that for Power BI. And maybe doing further aggregations of data in that database, stuff that's maybe harder to do in Dynamics.
Right.
Finding patterns that are harder to find within Dynamics, for instance. So that's also very useful to do.
Definitely.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting, actually, you brought up a really good point, is because before the data export service, OData can be quite difficult with Power BI and Dynamics, especially when you're doing things like option sets. It's not as straightforward. Data export service has made that a lot easier. So I found myself initially, right in the beginning, when the Power BI stuff came out, the connectors essentially, I did it a fair amount. But then when the data export service came out, I'm like, man, this is a game changer. It's an absolute. I
and there are a couple of tools that make it easier too, like the Power Query Builder that is on the XRM Toolbox makes that process super simple. I really like using that, but data export service is amazing. And the fact that you have direct queries that you can run against it, meaning you have almost real time results in Power BI. Not only that, but you go over the limitation in Power BI, which is the data, right? If you have Power BI free, you have 1 gig of data you can aggregate. If you have Pro, it's 10 gigs, right? If you do direct query to a data export service database, there's no limitation. You can query 15 gigs, 20 gigs. It doesn't matter. So, there's a bunch of other benefits. I think we can talk about that. But I was just curious because I feel that the messaging would be, if it came from Microsoft, is you should always go for Power BI and just continue to stick to that. But I feel that in the real world, people implementing this thing are still sort of going first with out of the box. I know I am. Yeah. I know that for me, that's what I do. So
I got to go against Chris and Chris here. I just intuitively, Power BI is what I grab first. It's interesting. I just get more. I think I just get more out of it. I sometimes find myself getting pretty frustrated with the out-of-the-box charts and dashboards. Yeah. I just don't like to be frustrated.
Interesting. So it seems to be a split. And I wonder how that's going to be, 2 years from now or whatever. And if Microsoft someday decides to make everything just be Power BI, then we're going to be stuck, right? And that's we're all going to be doing. But there's still some limitations on using Power BI. Like, for example, the fact that we can put a Power BI dashboard out there or embed it into a system dashboard, right? And that's one of the things I talked about in the episode, which is right now we're limited to personal charts and dashboards only on the Power BI styles and stuff. So
that's been massively limited. Wow, it's not a word. Limiting.
You just made it.
I did. It's made a word, man. It's like pilferating, stealing instant coffee.
Strategery.
That's it, man.
Well, Chris, you were putting a Power BI dashboard on or a report on a Canvas app today at your presentation, and that was again one of those moments where I was like, "Yes, this is the way. This is the way to go." So.
It really is. That's a great point. Also, Gus has got a good point where it's personalized. Like when you're doing it in Dynamics, it's the personalized data. What I've found, though, is that just from experience, that when you're building in a Power BI dashboard into Dynamics, most people end up clicking through into Power BI itself.
That's true.
Because you really want to, that's where you get the experience, right? It's the same as when you're doing Canvas apps. It's like, it looks really awesome in the Canvas app, but most people end up clicking out because the experience you're having is actually more of an analytical one rather than I need to get to my data.
I love how you agree with both of us. We're in different sides of the fence on this one.
Damn
It's
right.
like, are you Canadian? Or instead of South African?
Genuinely though, so my rules are, number one,
So
dynamic
polite.
dashboards. That's it. And number two, obviously Power BI. But I am a big lover of Power BI. There's a little love affair going on.
Nice. Okay, so here's another one. Another one that, and I think this speaks to the video we recorded on features that are tough to die. When we were in Tombstone, which Gustav had a really good answer, which was the Outlook client. Like, they try to kill that thing, and he just came back. It's too tough to die. So since we still have it, we can talk about this. If you're thinking about Outlook integration, if that is a big topic, and be able to track activities and track information and just have the full-on Outlook integration, knowing that we have the Outlook client and the app for Outlook, what do you go for first nowadays? I want to hear what you guys say.
I'd love to go for the Outlook app.
The Outlook app.
I would love to go for the Outlook app.
For the Outlook
Listen
client.
to what I'm saying.
But
Are you talking about the Outlook client or the app for Outlook?
The app for Outlook. I
Okay.
would love to go for
the
the
thin client.
app for Outlook.
Okay. The new stuff that everyone wants us to go
I
for.
would love to go for that.
Okay.
And then I'm just leaving that hanging.
Okay, but the reason. Okay, so what you're saying is you're typically not going for that, right? You're not going for that, but there's a reason for it. You're not doing it out of
Of course. Well,
Right.
I mean, every time I can, I do. Right? Because it's the future. But sadly, currently you can't. I mean, one of the most common questions we had in the Medic booth in CRM UG in Phoenix was, what happened? We can't track appointments in the Outlook app.
The app for Outlook, yeah.
Yeah, the app for Outlook. Sorry, I say it wrong. I'm Swedish, sorry. It's so they in 8.2, the app for Outlook, you could track appointments. Now you can't in 9.
Why?
I think it's temporary. They sort of refactored it, and they haven't gotten around to fixing that feature parity yet.
Interesting.
Yes, it is very interesting.
Actually, for me, it's a little bit different. For me, is hey, but I used to be able to navigate through my data.
That's it.
On the client, on the Outlook client before. Where is that section of my inbox or whatever? Where's the data?
That's exactly it.
But that's another aspect. But I think, there's other stuff in the app for Outlook that's great. I mean, you can very quickly create a contact from there. I open an email from you and I don't have you as a contact. I can just click create Gus and I'll create you as a contact.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
That's very,
and the fact that it runs in phones and it runs in Mac and it runs everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there are huge benefits to it.
Yeah, but then I have a customer who want to run they're thinking about running the client, the app, the normal CRM app, but their companies can't support the Outlook app for mobile.
Interesting.
And they want to be able to track emails. So how do you do that? It's not part of the story, right?
So now you have to go into folder level redirection or
right.
You have to figure something out.
That story doesn't work.
Really?
I mean, think about it. Have you tried?
Folder level sync. Yeah, I've tried it before.
But for real, have you tried it working with a customer for real?
But I don't know how big your customers are. But I've done it. I've done it before, and it seems to work well.
You can try it in a demo, and it's cool. It's cool thing for a demo.
Yeah,
when you're what's the guy from Contoso? Cat whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Katniss.
Cat Francis.
Katniss every
Hunger Games.
So back to the topic of the client for Outlook and the app for Outlook, or the Outlook client and the app for Outlook. What do you guys go for today?
I go for the app. I go for the app. It's just I'm a bit Canadian here in the sense that I could go for the client as well. I don't have a strong preference on this one, to be honest, but the app is just it's more convenient. It's easier for the user. It
doesn't crash their Outlook.
It doesn't crash their Outlook.
It loads at least 3 times faster. Yeah, it has a huge bunch of benefits.
I have a MacBook as a personal computer, as a machine of my own, so one of those aspects as well.
It's great when if the features of the app for Outlook are enough for you, and that's sometimes the case.
But that's a really good point that you've made. Actually, it is sometimes the case because they do different things. Again, like in my brain, it depending on the scenario. Like you have one customer of ours absolutely cannot live without the Outlook client, the thick clients, because they need access to their data. They want to go into a view inside Outlook. Like that's their mission, and for them, that's what the story was, right? So you take that away, and that ruins their day because that they can't do that anymore. We've got other customers who go, well, we don't need to do that, but we still need to be able to manually track mails, right? So that's perfect for the app.
Yeah,
and again, I'm a big fan of both. Again, like sitting on the fence, not really, but it depends on the scenario. 100% for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that the deal breakers are big. I think that there are deal breakers that are non-issues. Like, for example, the fact that you can go offline with an app for Outlook. Who cares? You shouldn't go offline with an Outlook client to begin with. So that's not non-issue for me. But the fact that you cannot navigate to your Dynamics data, the fact that
that's a problem.
Some of the things that you can do in the Outlook client, like using flags and using categories and conditional formatting and groups, and I mean, there's just a lot of functionality in the Outlook client that you just don't get with the app.
Yep.
But I do think that at some point, and perhaps this is why the Outlook client hasn't died, I do think that at some point the app will allow us to do a lot of that, and I think that the Outlook client should die. And I talked about it on episode 39.
Yeah.
What are the 10 things I want gone? I said Outlook client.
Yeah, I hope they build feature parity.
Yeah.
But they're quite far.
Not yet. They're not there yet. Yeah. And speaking of parity between two clients or whatever, we got to talk about the unified interface, because we know that there's a big chance that 2019 will be the last year of the web interface, the current interface that we have, which was essentially upgraded. What was it? CRM 2011 update rollup 12 when they introduced cross-browser support. Something like that. So it was a few years ago that
2011 was cross-browser.
That we received the new web interface. Now we have the unified interface, which still is missing a few things. But now thinking or knowing or expecting that 2019 will be the last year of the current interface, and knowing that the unified interface is lacking some things at the same time, on a project that you were starting today, what would you implement?
Unified interface.
Unified
interface. Yeah, no question.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we all agree on that. Brand new customers, I just don't think there's a reason for you to go to the current interface. I'm going to call it the classic interface. I started calling it classic even though it's still around, but the unified interface is just amazing.
Yeah, it is really cool.
We've shown them both. We've shown some customers both and told them that the old interface is a bit more stable, but the newer one, well, look at it. You choose. And then they say, yeah, we want a new one. So it's like no question when you show them to
one of the first things that customers tend to say when you show them both interfaces is the unified interface, because it's just a lot faster. It's just so much faster than a classic interface.
But there is one type of client that I have that don't like it. Guess which?
Those who need a Gantt chart?
No. It's an entire industry.
Wow. What?
That's
what
a
is
good point.
it?
Financial institutions.
Financial
Really?
services, yeah.
They don't like it?
No, because it's too much white space.
Really?
Yeah. Have you seen their Excel sheets? Yeah. They like Excel sheets with like font size 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're insane.
Now you can zoom down in your browser.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, make it 10% zoom.
That's really the way to make it.
Tiny.
That's really the way to work with it. Yeah.
Definitely. So I think we all agree on there's no reason for you to go to the classic interface if you're implementing Dynamics today for a brand new customer. So if you're listening to this thing and you're still implementing the classic interface, you need to stop. Because again, I mean, maybe Microsoft will change their mind, but I really feel that 2019 will be the last year of it. So,
and I do hope that they think about the different. I mean, what they're doing now is they're making it like mobile, really making it mobile first, really touch friendly. But they need to think about the fact that there are lots of users that are only working with Dynamics from a normal computer.
Definitely.
Yeah,
That's
and-
exactly
and-
right.
Workstation, yeah.
That's exactly
So,
right.
and I think that they're using it like on big screens with high resolution, and they really want to be able to get a lot of information on the screen at once.
And I think, I mean, there could be as easy as a configuration. I mean, you have the Gmail style. You want compact lists, or you want a normal, or whatever.
Yeah, correct.
It shouldn't be too hard.
Yeah,
True.
I totally agree.
Definitely. That's awesome. Okay, moving on to number 5, and this is an interesting one. So we know that in a lot of implementations, I would say most implementations, in order for you to get the most value out of it, is by you integrating solutions that cover the entire life cycle of the customer, right? From acquisition to delivery to service and extension of that customer, which means that in a lot of cases, our CRM systems have to integrate with our ERP systems or finance and operation, whatever, however we call that thing, right? ERP. I'm going to just call it ERP. We know that the story today, or the current story from Microsoft, is all about Power Platform. It's all about the common data service and the common data model. It's all about pushing data into it and have applications like Dynamics 365, customer engagement, sales, customer service, etc., read from that. Now, if you're starting a project today and the company, let's say they have SAP, okay, and you're starting this thing, is your immediate thought to look into the Power Platform and use the integrator or the integration connectors to SAP or whatever and leverage that for Dynamics? Or are you still going back to sort of the old ways, quote unquote, using data synchronization and integration tools like Kingsway, SoftScribe, whatever, and just sort of do it old school? Are you guys on this sort of cutting edge, like drinking the whole PowerApps, Power Platform Kool-Aid yet? Or are we still on sort of classic mode, waiting to see what happens within the next 6-12 months? Who wants to go first?
I can just give the short answer. Of course, I mean, when you go into the project, you evaluate. Is it there yet? Is it there yet? And
Well,
then,
is it?
well, probably not.
Okay.
So then you go with the classic solutions.
I'm gonna get punched for this one because I'm Mr. Power Platform evangelist here, but I'm not. No, I don't think it's there. Very honestly, in my opinion, because look, I'm not an integrator. I don't know a great deal amount of how it works. I've got the theory in my head, but I don't think what is available is ready. I'll still go Kingsway, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I when integrating with a system like SAP, I would actually talk to the customer, tell them, well, I think we should integrate using a service queue.
Yeah.
Not even do it with. We can integrate using the service queue with Kingsway Soft to the service queue, and then from there to
So,
SAP.
meaning the classic way, the way that you used to do it 2 years
because
ago.
I don't even
Whatever.
think that we should. And if for instance Logic Apps or Flow can support a service queue in the future, well, fine. Well,
yeah.
Logic Apps does support queues in Amazon in Azure.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you have to think about the entire integration architecture of the company, and maybe they're using simple queue services from Amazon, and then you have to work with that. So I mean, it's usually you have a bigger picture you have to think about. Yeah. So I think it's doing point-to-point integrations. I'm a bit allergic to that.
No, I don't like that.
Yeah.
No.
But I mean, when we're talking SAP, I mean, it should be just click next. They signed the ODI Open Data Initiative, so I mean, they all conform to CDM, no? Or at least in 10 years or so.
Do they?
Well, I saw him on stage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
At Ignite, they did conform. Anthony, what about you?
I know that the ladies and gentlemen that actually do the integrations at our company are very pro Kingsway Soft, so I'd probably get in trouble if I said something else.
Well, but you've been pretty on path with Microsoft, right? And their messaging so far, at least five points into our list. So you think you would lead with the Power Platform right now?
That's a tough question. Intuitively, I'd say that it's not there yet. That it probably is another.
I mean, it's getting there, right? I mean, they are introducing new stuff like every week or something. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah,
I'm watching stuff change.
I feel like nobody's working on like Windows anymore. Like everybody's just doing Power Platform
it's getting
stuff.
there. I think that just personally, I wouldn't feel confident using it just right now.
Interesting.
It's getting there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have to do like a version 2 of this episode like a year from now and see where we all stand on these.
Do we get to come to Stockholm again?
Oh, that would be awesome.
I'm in.
I mean, for sure, yeah. Or we do like on Iceland or something.
We need to get them good sponsors for
yeah.
next
We
year's
should,
event,
we should get like Rolex to sponsor like one of our
Rolex.
events. Yeah, Rolex and Corona, like they have money. Anyway, so back to the list.
Corona.
Back to the list. Okay,
You can call me Corona. That's fine.
number 6. Yeah. So number 6. Okay, so we have implemented Dynamics for our customer. Their sales team is loving it. But there's something missing, right? They want to do some marketing in Dynamics 365. They call you up. They're talking about marketing automation. They're talking about, is there any way we can send these emails out and track if they open them or not and create some campaigns so we can follow up and whatnot? Yeah, that sounds like marketing automation. By the way, I was looking through the Dynamics website and I saw something like Dynamics 365 for marketing. Is that something we can implement? So the question is, you have a customer asking for marketing automation. Do you go with Microsoft right off the bat, or do you go classic with the marketing automations leaders like ClickDimensions, Marketo, all these other companies? What do you do?
I will take the it depends answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, because it really depends. If it is a smaller business to business customer, and they are it's really sort of starting out, and they don't have many contacts in the system. Yeah, we could probably try, and they were like bleeding edge kind of company that we could try. They could sort of tolerate a bit of new tech.
So what you're saying is
in that case, I would definitely try that.
So what you're saying is you lead with Microsoft, but then if the requirements don't seem to conform, then you go third party. So do you lead with Microsoft?
No, this is for business to business marketing automation. But if it's a business to consumer marketing, I would definitely not go with Microsoft's.
Interesting.
Yes. So in that case, I would go, and then there's.
But ClickDimensions is also business to
it's
business
B2B,
marketing mainly, right?
No. Are they business to business marketing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they market themselves as. Yeah.
Okay.
B2B.
Oh well, I'd see them as rather strong in business to consumer as well.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you can use it for both, but they are. I think when I talk to people, you get this question like, marketing should we go ClickDimensions or should we look at Adobe? Right.
That's a big question.
Right. That question comes up
Big
often.
question.
And the real answer is, for me, is, if you do business to business, Adobe doesn't make sense.
No.
So Adobe is so straight up business to consumer that it's not even funny. Now, their tools are amazing. Like if you look at Adobe tools, like marketing automation tools for business to consumer, they're epic. And the stuff that they can do is amazing. But if you do business to business, it just doesn't make sense at all.
Sledgehammer to hit.
Like even assuming it costs the same, and we know that Adobe tools are way more expensive than ClickDimensions, right? But even if it costed the same, I wouldn't suggest Adobe because just the tool set doesn't make sense for business to business. Money aside, it doesn't matter. But what do you think, Chris?
I've had this discussion a lot. I actually did a presentation, a shootout between D365 for marketing, ClickD, and Adobe. It's a little bit of a ballsy statement, but let's just see where this goes. So I can tell you right now, I lead with Microsoft, the D365 for marketing functionality, knowing full well that it's bleeding edge, right? But in the back of my mind, I know that because the customer insights piece, that data piece is the most important thing when you're doing marketing. I don't care if you can create pretty emails. To me, that's a tenth of where you are. It's data.
Right.
Yeah. So I lead with that. A lot of the time we've put in ClickD, and because it's easy, it's a snap-in solution, I trust it, and I know the automation piece works very well. I think that the automation piece in the Microsoft products is slightly lacking, and I'm not 100% sure I trust it just yet, purely from experience. I mean, when I did my demo at the last 365 Saturday event, I sent out emails, and people got them 4 days afterwards. And now maybe it's just because it's a demo, but the other one, though, this is the real important one, is the Adobe piece is of vital importance because marketing is about data. If you've got a company that's looking at 20 different data sources to compile their marketing lists, right? Actually, Adobe's a really good fit, even though you want to use virtual entities. Adobe's a great fit there, right?
Interesting.
So it really depends, but my levels are, for B2B, it will be Dynamics 365 for marketing, ClickDimensions. For B2C, it is probably D365 for marketing, ClickDimensions if I could. But if other volumes are massive and the data sources are completely,
Yeah, if you're a company like Virgin Airlines or whatever, like Adobe makes total sense. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you guys think? Do you have any dog in this fight?
Yeah, marketing's aren't really my forte, so I got to say that it's not about what you know. You need to know the people who know.
Yeah.
So I basically pick Chris Huntingford to do that project.
Your voice. You're the tiebreaker, Chris. On this
man, one desire.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, I guess I'm not that advanced with the marketing app. I need to be. I need to get into it and spend some time with it. So right now, my instinct is to look into Click Dimensions. We use it internally, so I'm sort of used to it. I see the results. I know it works. I'm not saying that Dynamics marketing, the for marketing app, doesn't work. I don't know enough about it. For a while, and I think the first impression that they gave us, and we took a look at the last MVP Summit before they released it, and the first impression, especially the licensing aspect of it, just made no sense to me. And that's why I saw, like, when they talked about the licensing aspect of it, I'm like, I'm never going to be able to sell this thing. It just doesn't make any sense for me to invest any time. I'd rather get better in Click Dimensions because I know that they're based on this information. They're going to be around forever, apparently. For sure. But now the licensing is different. So now it makes sense to talk about it. So I don't think I can speak enough, or I would just say that right now, based on my understanding of both sides of it, I would have to leave with Click Dimensions just because I understand it better, but not because the other one is bad.
The one thing I will say, though, just off the back of that, is that if you're looking to do quite a big amount of configuration, it's a lot easier to configure around ClickD than it is for D365 for marketing, just based on personal experience.
Right.
I've found that with the ClickD stuff, I gave you the example today. We were creating upsell alerts on contact records based on like form completions and things like that. Lots of config. So I've learned that the layer of config you can put on top of Click Dimensions is massive, and we've been successful with it.
Right.
Whereas D365, I don't know enough about it yet, and I don't trust it enough.
Same with me. Now, marketing automation is one of those things that is, I mean, it's like it happens in like almost every company. They want it, right? But there are some tools that don't happen all the time. There are some solutions that are more specific. And we have the AppSource, which is supposed to be the repository of all of the apps that are out there sort of certified. They went through a process to get up to be listed in AppSource. I think I remember listing things on the old marketplace, and it was like the easiest thing ever. Like you would just create a solution. Like I remember I created one. It was like a workflow that allowed you to create like follow-up phone calls or something. I just went and listed it on the marketplace, and like within 30 minutes, that thing was listed. Like no big deal because it was all automated, right? So you went through a process. You put your the way it works is you get a 30-day trial. You go start the process, and then it takes like a snapshot of the environment, and then the process said like import your solution. You imported it, took another snapshot. Then it said delete your solution, took another snapshot, just to make sure that you went through the 3 steps and you can uninstall it successfully. And then after that, you get like thumbs up. It's listed, ready to go. It was awesome, right? From that perspective. But then anyone could really list anything in Marketplace. But still, nobody really seemed to be using Marketplace. We defaulted to Google or word of mouth or referrals. Hey, has anybody, for us as MVPs, it's easy because has anybody used a solution called this? Or does anybody know a solution for car dealerships or whatever it is? And more than likely, somebody has done it in the past. But now we have AppSource. My question is, if you're looking for a solution, whatever it is, do you use AppSource the way it's meant to be used? Or do you still rely on sort of your old ways of finding these solutions, like using Google, referrals, going to, conferences and stopping by their booths? Like, how do you find solutions today?
Yeah, I would say look at AppSource because there could be really good stuff there, but you risk missing out on really good stuff because it's not all the ISVs or third-party vendors that actually go through the process of putting stuff on AppSource, since we know it's more work today than it was in your experience.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say that I need an app that can generate a QR code from a custom record in Dynamics. So I have a custom entity to track vehicles, and I wanted to generate a QR code that gives me the information about the vehicle. So you need a solution for that. You need to research, look for one. Where do you go first?
Well, in that case, I guess AppSource, yes.
Interesting.
It's quite an easy, small feature that I'm looking for, so it should be out there. Then, of course, I mean, as you say, you check for references. Is this really something good? Has anyone worked with it?
Yeah,
But
so you do
yeah,
your homework.
that's the first place I go.
Interesting. Okay. What do you think, Ed?
I think the consumer in me probably kicks in, and I try to do a lot of research from different angles. I use AppSource, but then again, I'd use my contact network as well, and just try to dig out the best possible options. So I just invest on researching the best possible way and option.
Okay.
Google.
Just Google.
Yeah, I like AppSource, but I don't know, man. I just every single time I default to Google, without kidding. And I want to go to AppSource.
The thing is, like,
but I
if you go to AppSource first, but you don't trust it, right? If you get a result and you're like, oh, let me Google on top of it or Bing or whatever.
but I do that anyway. Yeah.
Why don't you just start with that?
Look, I know. It's just, it's just really random. Like a lot of the stuff you were showing me today. That's another way to get information around apps. But
yeah,
genuinely, it's Google first, and I'm like, oh, sweet, cool. I can get it from AppSource. But most of the time, I'll plug it into
because
a
you
search
find
engine.
AppSource listing on Google too.
But that's exactly it.
It's not like you're missing out,
Exactly.
right? What do you think?
I'd probably start with AppSource.
Okay.
And then I'd Google as well, and I'd find several different sources and see if anybody finds it, and I'd ask you or some Jonas or.
Notice that Google versus Bing is not one of the topics.
No, you can't. I mean, you're in Sweden now. You can't use Bing here. It sucks in Sweden.
Why?
Because I think it's based on that there's actually real people putting stuff in Bing, and that doesn't work in Sweden.
It has to be unreal
no,
robots.
because in Sweden we have taxes that are super high, and if you have to pay them people, that doesn't, so that they would just become super expensive to use Bing. Jonas just looks like he looks with.
Well, I just think you mention it awful lot on podcasts here and there. So I mean, I think Sweden is a good country.
It is a good country.
I think it's awesome, man. I'm loving it.
Listen to them.
This is great.
It is a good country.
Paid
some
for
taxes.
Yeah, but we have high taxes.
Yeah.
A little bit. But it's a good country too.
Well, you guys aren't alone on that one.
Yeah.
No, Finland has high taxes and it's not a good country.
Sweden versus Finland.
Let's not go there. You don't want to start a war with Finland.
Exactly. All right, so we're moving on to number 8. We're getting close to the end of the list here. I want to talk about how in some cases you have these requirements that sort of make you think that you can do it with portals. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I own a company that sells, I don't know, horse stables. Whatever. It doesn't
horse
matter.
tables.
What's a horse table?
Who cares? Whatever. Wireless bungee cords. Okay. So I have a company that sells wireless bungee cords, and every time I sell a wireless bungee cord, I want my customers to go in and register it for warranty because they have lifetime warranty. Because I'm smart like that. So that makes you think immediately of, okay, well, I'm not going to allow my customers because I don't even know who they are. And they're clearly nuts because they're buying the wireless bungee cords. I'm not gonna give them access to my CRM system. So they have to somehow register these warranties. Should you use portals, or do you look into other solutions that are out there that are way more established? Like, for example, I've done it with Voice of the Customer. You create a feedback, which is essentially a form like the portal. You can register stuff through it. You can even upload documents on those things. There's Web to CRM, which is Jerry's company, CRM Innovation. They have this thing called Web to CRM. They've had it forever. Same thing. Web form directly to Dynamics. So there's other options. Now, we know portals are free. Web to CRM is not free, although it's not super expensive. But what is your first instinct? Do you immediately go into portals, or do you stay away from it?
Definitely go straight up to portals. Honestly, it's actually probably ignorance on my end, but like I've always tried to resolve anything like that scenario with wireless bungee cords with portals. Yeah, for me it would be go-to. And again, I don't know. I know there are lots of other technologies out there, but that's the one that I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I don't default to anything. I mean, if I meet a customer and they're like, "Yeah, we're a new company. We don't have any web technology at all," then I would be like, "Okay, maybe you should have a web. What would you like?
You should get a website before you get
probably
a CRM system.
You should probably have a website, and then maybe I would say, WordPress is probably a good website. Maybe we should have some kind of like interface towards that. And
That's
maybe
true. That's another option. Then
maybe I use
There is a
Alexa
connector with
CRM or
WordPress.
something.
yeah.
So,
George's connector from
So
WordPress to CRM.
I think
Dynamics.
you're not an island. So you should probably look at what kind of ecosystem are they living in and existing in, and then work from there. Just having a portal might be useful, might be easy, but sometimes it's also hard to make, especially if you have people at the company that are somewhat interested in making all the websites looking more or less the same with a coherent look and feel. That might be interesting to make that work if you have a portal and you have a WordPress site with different themes and stuff like that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's you pretty well summarized the situation there. I'd intuitively, I'd start off with portals, and then just kind of run the requirements by the customer and see if that's if that would suffice, and if it would, then I'd go for portals.
Interesting.
Then on the other hand, then wireless bungee cords. I'm not really seeing those customers come back, so I'm not sure how it works.
Well done.
Yeah. I think I'm the only one perhaps in here that doesn't really lean towards portals, and the reason for that is, number one, I think they do a lot for what we're trying to do, which is just registering warranties, and number two is because you only get one portal with your subscription. Now you can pay for more, but you only get one, and I feel that having a portal to just capture customer warranties will be a waste. I feel that I would rather stay away from leveraging that. I would stick to voice of the customer, feedback. I would use web to CRM. I would use George's connector on the, on that side, and leave the portal for one of those, like, oh, you really want to have a community where people can log in and ask questions of each other. It's like, oh, how long do you go on your wireless bungee cord ride or whatever? Like, okay, then a portal makes sense, I feel like. Or if I have a bunch of vendors around the world, so I'm not the only one getting sued. That's when the portal comes in handy. So for me, I think in that specific case, I would stay away from portals if possible. But
I think the voice of the customer perspective that you have, I think it's really good. And I think the voice of the customer is really underused.
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
It is a really good tool, and you can use it for a lot of things that are not even close to being a customer survey tool. You can get a lot of tools. I have a customer. They use it for. It's actually when you go to the website, they have a pop up, and it's for signing up for a newsletter. That's actually a voice of the customer form, which is in an iframe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. You can never see that it's actually a voice of the customer form.
I agree with you. I think it's very underutilized. So definitely people should look into ways to get the most value out of it. I think as we're moving to the last two on the list, they should be pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask you guys what you think about this one. You have a customer. They need to access functionality via the mobile device. Is your initial thought, I'm going to create a Power App for this thing? And Chris, you create Power Apps for everything. So I know what you're going to say.
Yep.
Do I create a Power App for this thing? Or do I try to do it with Dynamics, just the Dynamics 365 for mobile app? Assuming you can do it with both, right? Assuming that you're trying to enter data or doing something you can do with a regular out-of-the-box Dynamics 365 app. Do you still go for a Power App, or do you stick with the regular out-of-the-box, I still call it Mocha, app?
I will. You're controlling you're giving me cards, and I have to play with your cards.
No, but we have two solutions to the same problem, right?
No,
if
there's three.
If the problem was something that you can only do with a Power App, then it wouldn't be a discussion, right?
There's the third option.
What's the third option?
Resco.
Yep. You see, no, I think that's heavy
interesting.
lifting. That's heavy lifting, though.
It might be.
Yeah.
But it depends on the bigger picture, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's
Right.
down to the requirements. Like I will tell you right now, customer requirement A, capture a lead while you're offline, straight away for me as a Power App. That's a Canvas app because you can go offline. You can't do that in the CRM mobile clients, right? As much as I would like it to be that way, they don't. But then I've got customers that need a full proper view of their customer record when they're going to visit somebody, activities, notes, documents. That's the mobile app for the Dynamics 365 mobile app. Then you're looking at the field services side. We need to go and fix submarines in the deep dark depths of Samoa, and it's the fat finger technician. Well, hell yeah, that's Resco. So it's 100% down to the scenario. But at the moment, because I'm
So I'll give you the
happy.
scenario.
Yeah.
I'll give you the scenario. We
Yeah.
were today at an event, Dynamics
Yeah.
365 Saturday in Stockholm. Great event. We need to check in people as they walk in. Just check them in, who they work for, make sure they attended. You can do that in Dynamics with the mobile app. We have a connection at the Microsoft Office, so this is not an offline thing. You have a connection. Do you create a Power App to do those check-ins, or do you just do out of the box?
I'll create a Power App. It's just easier.
Yeah, but I mean, in this case, the scenario is that you're given.
I don't even
is
know why I
that-
asked you. I knew.
Exactly. Come on.
But the scenario given here is not focused around the records. I mean, to use Microsoft terminology, it's not model driven. This is a process. You identify a person, he says, "Hi, I'm Chris, I'm Huntingford." Okay, you enter that and you want to say he was here. And what you're then working with more than one entity. It's not model driven context anymore. So you're working with this guy. Okay, so this app should look up Chris Huntingford by first name, last name or something, and you should check him in, meaning there's an attendance entity or something somewhere that you want to check. Yeah, he's here. So in this case, you're working with more than one entity. It's not model driven, so you're not using model driven app, the Mocha client or whatever we call it today. So then it's a Canvas app. It's task focused.
Woo.
Interesting. Good. All right. That's good stuff. Finally on the list. This should be easy. So if you say it depends, I'm gonna
slap you.
So one of the things that was introduced, I think it was CRM 2013 or 15, I don't remember anymore, but was introduced to essentially standing ovation, was Editable Grits. Whenever that thing came out, everybody loved it. Everybody wanted it. Everyone loved it. So today, when you implement Dynamics, do you enable Editable Grits out of the box for every implementation, or do you stick with classic ones?
It depends.
No.
Yeah, but what don't you get with editable grids?
What?
You don't get as many rows.
What
And
do you mean?
they're easier to not as easy to open, and they're slower.
Yeah, but you can. I mean, there's pros and cons.
But you can
There
edit
are
things.
pros. There are pros and cons.
You
I
can
totally agree.
mistakenly edit
So
your data.
if you have a read-only entity where the users typically don't edit stuff, like a category, for instance, why would you have it edit?
Well, it doesn't make sense to have an editable grid for a read-only entity.
No, of course not. So you don't enable it, right? Yeah.
Duh. No, but like, I'm talking about, because there are some things that are based on requirements. The customer wants to edit stuff on the grid, boom, editable grids, right? So I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about you have a customer who doesn't care. They don't have a requirement. It's up to you to decide what the UI is going to look like. What do? Do you enable this stuff, or do you leave it?
No, sometimes, because it depends. But also because if it's only seldomly edit something, and mostly look at it, why would you enable it? It's easier just to open it and edit.
Yeah. I agree. I personally don't turn it on. It's
Okay.
yeah, no, but
Because
it's purely because of experience. Yeah.
Because they're a bit cumbersome.
They are
if you-
actually, and it's weird.
you-
to
So you don't
navigate.
know what side of the picture I am. I might be agreeing with you or
No,
disagreeing, but I'm
but
just curious.
look at it. If you, let's say that you typically what you want to do is that you
Right.
have like 40 fields that you are interested in looking at, for instance, on a contact or an account, and you can only, how many fields can you see in a view, right? Not that many.
Right.
Yeah. So what you want to do is that you typically see like 5-10 fields. Then you want to open it, and well,
You're
then
clicking on them.
You're
it's a
clicking on
pain,
like
yeah.
all this other stuff, and you're getting mad, and then it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to edit this stuff. And where am I supposed to click? Oh yeah, I have to scroll up to the right, all the way over to the right, and then click this like arrow over there, and then I can open it. Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
but I agree with you 100%. It's for me from a navigation perspective. It's weird. Like I've turned it on in a couple of instances, and it's relevant in some places, but no, I'd leave it off.
But don't
For-
you
for
think
many
this is like?
subgroups, yeah.
I mean, when they invented color television, you think, oh, this looks really weird. It used
Yeah.
to be black and white. Oh, it's a new thing, you know.
Only if I'm watching a movie that has a lot of colors.
No, but I really like it in some other cases because, for instance, in subgrids, when you have like a mapping entity, for instance, but there is also some stuff missing from it. If you have the editable grid and you want to add a new record, you can't do that directly in the editable grid. You get a quick. The best way you can do it is actually get a quick create, right?
create, yeah.
Yeah. But I want to be able to add it directly in the grid. You can't do that.
No.
I get so frustrated.
Yeah, I'm gonna run with the classic experience here.
Yeah.
Wow.
I only tried it a couple of times, the Editable Grid, to be honest. It's just, personally, don't like to use it.
So that's why I added it to
That's
this
a
list,
mix.
because I think it's interesting that you get a standing ovation, and I think that if they ask 1,000 professionals out there, whether Dynamics 365 is better by having editable grids, 100% people would say yes. But then when you think about the actual putting it in practice and using it, most people don't do it.
Yep.
Right? For a variety of reasons. You mentioned that. So for me, I talked about this on the previous episode too, I typically stick with the non-editable grids just because it's such a pain to enable editable grids in all the entities. There should be an easier way to do it. However, if tomorrow Microsoft said, by the way, starting on November 12th or whatever tomorrow is, we are going to enable editable grids by default, I wouldn't go and turn it off. I would just switch and change my training and be like, guys, grids are editable now. Get over it. Like, that's the way it's going to be. I don't think I would go and undo it. It's like one of those things that today I'm not really leveraging because it's a pain. But if Microsoft all of a sudden enables it, I'll run with it and I'll just use that. How do you guys feel about that? Would you go back and turn it off?
Probably not.
It depends.
I'd still not do it.
I just said that.
You still would turn it off?
Yeah.
Stay with classic? That's interesting. So thank you guys so much for being here and discussing these things for me. With me. Hopefully, people listening in got a different perspective on whatever they think and their best practice.
It depends.
Depends on who's listening. So one of the things I want to do is, again, people listening to this will be interested in hearing more about it, have some questions. How about we go around the table here and talk about what's the best way to reach you? So, starting with you.
Well, usually I'm a lot on Twitter, so easiest just find Rappen, Rappen. Ping me. I will try to have an opinion. I usually succeed in that.
Twitter for me as well, ANTTIPAJUNEN.
Sorry?
On Twitter. Or just day-to-day Dynamics 365 for my blog.
Okay, awesome.
Right, so Twitter, the tattooed CRM guy. And we also run a community site called Those Dynamics Guys. If you plug it into Google, you'll find us there. And we're doing a lot of PowerAppy type stuff.
Nice. Good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, but Jonas just criticized me today because I didn't respond properly on Twitter. So maybe I'm not on Twitter.
Twitter jail?
Yeah. It depends, though.
It depends, though.
It depends. All right.
Yeah, but otherwise, I also have a blog on goodstuffwestern.blogspot.com. So it's probably better to sort of leave a comment there somewhere, or you can email me at goodstuff.western@crmconsulternow.com.
And you need to get your own domain. Blogspot.com?
Yeah, but I just keep it there because I had it since like 20. What is it?
You just like people to get spam when they visit your
2006 or something like that. I started it, so I just kept it there.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know there's like Blogspot points or something for keeping old stuff.
No, I don't.
Blogspot police.
It's just there for Google.
Blogspot rewards.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you everyone for tuning in. As I mentioned before in every episode, of course, feel free to check out all of our other episodes at crmmvppodcast.com and follow us on Twitter at crmmvppodcast for news about future episodes and to suggest names of people to interview like these fine gentlemen here. And thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks.